Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is literally waiting up for her husband while she's writing this letter. But before we give up... What?
No, I liked it.
Okay. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we are not professionals. We are not trained in this. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right. Today's letter is from anxious about being too anxious or not anxious enough. So relatable. Mm-hmm. Their pronouns are she, her. And they're writing to us from the Bay Area, but Bay is spelled B-A-E. Y'all are so cute and smart.
Cute. It's cute.
Okay. My spouse, he, him, and I've been married for 4 years, together for 9. Woo! And we're in our mid to late 30s. We have a loving, intentional, next level partnership built from mutual trust, a lot of fun, years of a great couples therapist who we don't see anymore, but she helped us so much, and just generally being on the same page about life. There's just one thing that seems to come up from time to time that really freaking triggers me. He has one friend who always seems to get him to stay out super late. We're talking he gets too drunk to drive home, so he either has to stay over late. They always hang out in the friend's town, which is about an hour away. We're talking 3 a.m. when we both have to work the next morning, and when we've had previous unrelated conversations about reasonable weeknight bedtimes being closer to 11 p.m. And worse yet, he's terrible at communicating it, to the point where he'll be hanging out for 6 hours, so it's starting to get a little late, text me a check-in text saying, "Hey babe, I'll be home soon," or "I'll be heading home in an hour," and then, quote, soon and, quote, an hour turn into 3 more hours without a word from him. So I'll text him asking for an update, and he'll say the same thing, soon, and then the same results, silence and absence. I've even asked him to try to agree on a rock-solid ETA before he leaves the house, so expectations are clear on both sides, and no go. So I guess it's 3 problems. 1, the being out late and or getting too drunk. 2, the triggering communication of false promises during it. And 3, the mystery of why this guy in particular inspires this behavior.
Sure.
Listen, we all have that friend.
I have that friend. Absolutely.
I fucking have that friend.
Yeah, no, for sure. Where you're just like, how did it become 1 a.m. and why did we drink so much?
Yeah. This has now happened 4 times, counting tonight, and I'm really struggling to get him to see why this is hurtful and confusing for me, while also trying to not be too controlling or unreasonable. I like that he has fun with his friends. I'm happy this guy is such a good match for him. I'm fuming, I'm shaking, and I'm bewildered and sad and angry. I don't think my insecurity about this is coming from a place of jealousy. I don't have FOMO about hanging out with this friend, and I do trust my spouse is not doing anything that would break any of our relationship boundaries, but more like I just want him to not continue this pattern of behavior. Sure. Because it's hurtful and bizarre to me on several levels. I just don't know. Are my feelings valid? Or as a grown man, should he be able to have fun with his friends and stay out as long as he pleases? What kind of language do you think I could use here to express my feelings and my boundaries in a respectful, non-harmful way? What is the, quote, consequence for a repeatedly broken boundary in a relationship? Is it okay to have a boundary and a partner who cannot respect that boundary? Should the struggle there be about coming to peace with that friction, or should the struggle be somehow convincing your partner to respect that boundary, even if it doesn't make sense to them? I fucking love this letter.
I know you do.
I just think it's so good. It's just such a relatable letter.
It is. All right, Anxious, thank you so much for writing, for trusting us with this question. I will say that I deeply relate to a lot of this. because I did spend some years in a partnership with a person who liked to go out really late and stay out very late without communicating very much with me. And I remember how anxious I felt when he wasn't responding, when it was getting so late.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to say like, oh, well, just go to sleep and he'll be there in the morning. But like that didn't even feel available to me in lots of different ways. So I deeply relate to the level of frustration, anxiety, tension that you're feeling in this moment, sadness as well. And I want to just say, like, before we even get into anything else, that like all of those feelings that you're experiencing around this behavior are 100% valid, right? Like it is not unreasonable or silly for you to feel hurt, frustrated, sad by all of these, by the way that your partner is behaving for all the reasons that you listed, right? Like this idea that he's like going against things that you've agreed to, this idea that he's not communicating well, like all of that is really, really frustrating. And I think Sierra and I are here to help you figure out how to have conversation with him about this. And we'll also think about like how you can reframe some of your own expectations around your response and what you can do in that response to hopefully make this a little bit less of a triggering event and maybe something that feels a little bit more like you can hold it in your arms.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break.
All right, my darling, I have to just point out one of my favorite details of this letter is the word bizarre. When you were like, it's just bizarre that he doesn't get it. Because that's the word that I would use in the same situation. And there have been times, conflicts with my spouse and I, where I'm just like, I would so never act this way. You know, I would never see it this way. I would never say a different ETA or whatever it is. And I'm so guilty, or it is so just so understandable to me, the use of the word bizarre there, because I'd be like, it's bizarre of you to say you're leaving and then you don't leave. And then you don't see that that's confusing to me. It's bizarre.
That's not bizarre in the Midwest where it takes 3 hours to be able to like leave someone. Like you have to, you're talking again. You know, you can't help it. Suddenly.
No, and I hated that. When I lived in Minnesota, I hated it. As a New Yorker, I was like, okay, bye.
Yeah, we said goodbye. Why aren't you leaving the building? And it's like, no, we said goodbye. And then we have to talk about this other thing that came up. And then we have to say goodbye again. And then it's great. It's delightful.
It's my hell. Okay, anyway. Back to anxious about being too anxious or not anxious enough. I echo what Sam said. All of this is really relatable. And there's like a speed bump or a pothole in my advice, and that I keep getting stuck on too, which is the idea of like, wow, this sounds like disrespectful behavior. And I was thinking when I was prepping with Sam before we press record, like this would really bother me because like you said, it's bizarre. It doesn't make sense. Like, why are you like, it would grind all of my gears in the wrong way. And then I was talking with Sam really briefly that like something that I need to examine is like, why do I think it's disrespectful? Like, what is it that's making me feel triggered via you? That like I think you say like a false promise, like, you know, and I'm thinking about the conflicts that my spouse and I have that I feel similar, like confusion. And they often come down to just like different communication styles, different values. Not that he values like honesty less than you do, but that like, you know, he like maybe this isn't disrespectful the way you and I think it is. I don't know. Does that
it doesn't
make sense? It doesn't read disrespectful to Sam.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Sorry.
But to me, I'm like, well, and part of it is that it doesn't make sense. Like the letter writer said, like to me, it's just like, why would you say that? You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and I totally get that. But I also like have been the person who's like, oh, I'm going to head home. But then it's like, we're getting to talking and then we have another drink. And then suddenly it's like 2 hours later. And I've also like been on the receiving end of that. And it doesn't strike me as disrespectful, right? Like, and I totally understand how it could be. Like I totally get it. Like the person's like, I'll be home in an hour, and then they're not home for another 3 hours. Like I can understand how that feels disrespectful. But as somebody who is like not as beholden to like clock time as I think lots of other people are, like I'm like 1 hour, 3 hours is like kind of like the same amount of time to me. Like it doesn't.
Yes. Willow is like that. And also Willow, to her credit, like something I had to get used to is that she kind of is a go with the flow type of person. And when she's with other people, she doesn't like to look at her phone. Like she doesn't have social media. She sometimes, before we were together, she would leave her phone in the car when she went to bars, like went out with her friends.
Peter does that too.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, I want to know when you're coming home so I can be ready, so I can be prepared. I want to be in conversation with you because I'm codependent. Whoops. I'm making dinner, So like this would be really triggering for me because I'm much more beholden to my phone, to communicating, to the expectations of that communication and of my absence. Whereas like Willow's more like, here's a great example just to put a cap on this example. But like when Willow and I go to big public events, like Willow really loves races, like half marathon races or race day, She gets really excited by them. They're emotional. She loves to watch them. And she will often just like walk off on her own because she's excited. And then I can't find her. Or like, we'll be like, okay, let's meet here. But then she won't answer her phone. We can't meet there. I can't find her or whatever. I remember we got in a fight once because I was like, put your fucking find my friend thing on your phone so that I can just find you because you're not responsive via text message. Right, you know what I mean?
Which is I think a reasonable like request to have of like, if you're not going to tell me where you are, then like at least let me find you because we're in a right. Like, you know what I mean?
Okay, so but like she was just moving in space and time and in this experience differently than I am because she was like head up watching the racers, wanted to be there, all of that. I'm over here like, where's my spouse because I want to enjoy this day with her. Do you know what I mean? And I took it really personally that she wasn't answering her phone. And she was like, I was just there having fun. And I was like, that hurts my feelings. Anyway, this is might not be a perfect example and we're getting a little off topic, but I'm sharing that to highlight like one of the ways that I think we need to approach this conflict is that like, it's not making sense. It's bizarre to you because it's normal to him or something's happening there where it's like we're speaking in different languages. And can he be more respectful of his communication style, of his directness, of his estimation? I don't know, whatever. Yes. And also we have to recognize that you are two totally different people with two totally different relationships to this scenario, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For sure. Absolutely.
This is not even the advice I meant to lead with because it's like the weakest of all the advice we're about to get. So please keep listening.
Yeah. And I think like one of the things I think I'm glad that we started with this because I think one of the things that can be helpful for us is to recognize that like so much of our desires around assuaging our own anxiety is about like changing people's behavior so that we're not triggered by those things. Right. And like, this is like I think the cultural conversation that we're having right now around like boundaries versus like what are rules that we're imposing on other people. And like the idea that if we impose enough rules on people, we can like control the situation enough so that we won't feel any anxiety around it. Right. Which can happen in like relationships and like really sort of not necessarily deeply unhealthy ways, right? Where we're like, can we have a rule that like, like we don't have our phones in bed at after 10 or something, right? We're like talking about it. We're agreeing to it. We're deciding that this is best for us in our relationships. And then there's like rules that we want to impose on other people to control them, which is like, you can't post pictures of yourself in your swimsuit on your Instagram or whatever it would be. That's a specific reference to Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
Right?
And
like,
also just like to everybody who has sent that to us, I feel like there's enough think pieces out there.
For sure. Absolutely.
Assessing this people's relationship. However, we are going to talk about the differences between rules and boundaries and the misuse of boundary. And Absolutely. Sam is setting it up perfectly right now.
I am on board with the idea that there are rules in relationships. I think that is really healthy and really wonderful. And those rules have to be agreed to by both people in the relationship for the health of each other in the relationship, right? Like we can't just impose rules on other people. But what we sometimes do is we think that like, I'm going to impose this boundary on you, which is about how I'm going to control your behavior or how I'm going to like ask you to change your behavior in some meaningful way. When what boundaries actually are internal ways that we're going to handle things as they come up. So a boundary could be like, I don't want to be in relationship with somebody who is not communicating with me about where they're going to be and how they're going to be there, right? Like that's an okay thing. But then you have to decide to not be in relationship with that person, right? Like the boundary, again, is about self-practice. I'm going to leave this situation because it's making me deeply upset, right? Like that's an okay boundary to have. It's also an okay boundary for you to have of saying, because this is so triggering for me, I'm just going to assume that you are going to stay out all night when you hang out with this person. I'm going to assume that this is just a night in for me where I'm like on a little mini vacation, right? Like that's how I'm going to handle this situation. It doesn't mean that your partner can't do what your partner wants to do, but it's about how are you reacting or responding to it in a way that preserves your own sense of self and feels in alignment with your values. And again, it might be that you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who's staying out all night. Like, I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing, but the issue is when we try and use that to control or like, control is a really intense word here, but like to sort of litigate people's behavior rather than saying it's not right. It's not their responsibility to make me feel better, to uphold my own boundary around this. I have to be the one to do that by either changing my own behavior, or my own perspective, right? Like whatever it might be, or preserving those things. So I want to say to you that like, I get the impulse to want to say like, don't do this stuff, text me more often. And I want to say that like, that's not an unreasonable thing to ask your partner for. Like, I'm not saying you're like being a controlling, horrible person here. But when this stuff comes up, it's about what you are going to do in response to this situation, not about how are you going to successfully control the behavior of your partner, because that's not something that's available to us. And the only way that it's available to us is through unhealthy and toxic ways of behaving, right? Like, you can control him. You can say like, you can't be friends with that person and I'm going to like slash your tires if you decide to go out with him, right? Like that is something that you could do in order to control the behavior. But what I'm more interested in is how do we help soothe you and how do we help you talk about the impact that this is having on you in a way that he's going to be able to hear better.
That is so tricky. It is 100% correct what you just said, but I'm just sitting here thinking all of the times that people have done something to hurt me or frustrate me or disrespect me. And the obvious reaction in those moments was you need to change this behavior to make up or for disrespecting me or make it better or what, or don't do this again.
Yeah. When that boyfriend was staying out until 3 a.m. every night, my idea was not like, how do I change my behavior to get out of this situation? Instead, it was like, how do I control him? How do I call him 17 times? Right. Like I totally get it. Yes,
then
absolutely.
The onus is on you. Then you have to say, and just caveat really quickly before I finish this idea, I don't think that this relationship is headed towards separation or divorce over this.
Absolutely not. No.
But in this, in this example, like, or your boyfriend in college, like, then the onus is on you to say, I deserve better. I'm rejecting the love that you're giving me right now because it is not good enough because you've repeatedly disrespected me. And my boundary is that I'm with somebody who's more communicative and who doesn't do this. You know what it is? And in this letter, what it is that if you have had clear requests for changed behavior and there hasn't been perhaps even just like a reasonable like effort or, both sides trying to meet in the middle, like that's a conversation, that's a negotiation. And then your boundary is like, okay, how am I going to react to whatever is bound to happen? Like, man, and you said this before we press record, like we all use the word boundary wrong, not just Jonah
me
Hill.
too.
Like,
absolutely. I'm catching myself doing it as I'm sort of, as we're having more of these conversations around
please
boundaries.
respect my boundary. That statement is almost always meant to be for ourselves. How are we respecting our boundaries?
For sure.
And to be honest, while I think that's 100% true, it makes it hard to give advice to this person, this letter writer, because, okay, so now what does she do to respect this boundary? I guess first we need to establish what it is. What is your boundary? That you don't want to stay up late waiting for your husband to get home because it's anxiety inducing and uncomfortable and it's hard for you to sleep before work. Like all of that is reasonable. Like I would rather take a sleeping pill if I knew my wife was going to be out late than because like I would wake up and if she was still out, it would just panic me, even though I trust her implicitly, more like, oh my God, did something happen? Is she in a car accident or whatever? Anyway, so maybe I don't know, help me out. What is the boundary and how do we enforce it? Like she says in the letter, this repeated, not respected rule or whatever we want to call it now.
Maybe the boundary is like, when you go out with this person, I go stay with a friend. Or maybe it is, like Sierra said, like I go to bed early and I take a melatonin and I just like try and sleep. Right? No, I'm
just saying like I would want to be out, Right?
Because like, again, it's like, I don't necessarily see the behavior that he is doing as being like deeply harmful to the relationship. I totally understand that there are probably people who are going to like disagree with me on that, but I also, I don't feel like it is. And it sounds like you don't either. You're like, this has happened 4 times in the course of our relationship.
It's really annoying and really frustrating, really bizarre, but it's 4 times and I love my husband.
And he's not doing anything else that's like overstepping any of the relationship agreements that we have, right? Like all of that stuff. You're like, so that's what I'm taking this as. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just that this guy really likes to get your husband drunk, which is like, fine. Like, I could totally get that.
Totally.
And again, it is like about how are you going to do the work of self-soothing, because you are implicitly agreeing to this by continuing to stay in this relationship with this person, right? Like you are saying that like, yep, I know despite the fact that this is a thing that my partner does, I'm continuing to be with him, which I'm absolutely on board with 100%. So then how do you decide what you're going to do in those situations? So for me, it would be, again, like I said, I'm going to assume that you're not coming home tonight, right? So I'm going to give myself permission to not worry about you. I'm going to entrust you into the hands of this friend of yours, right? Like go be with him. I'll see you in the morning. 2, I'm going to remind myself that like, I'm not in charge of your getting to work on time, right? Like you are not my child. You are a full grown adult who gets to make decisions about what their work life looks like. So I'm going to go to work in the morning and you can decide what you're going to do. If you call in sick, whatever it might be. I'm going to, in this situation, treat myself to something. I'm going to hang out with a friend.
Sushi.
I'm going to eat sushi. I'm going to be like,
candy.
Great.
That's what I would do.
Sam's night in. Let's do it. Like, let's have fun. Like, let's watch a movie Peter wouldn't want to watch. Like, I would try and be like...
I would turn my phone off.
I would honestly do that too. I would be like, it's a no phone night. I'm just going to like put it in the bedroom and I will... And I won't look at it tonight, right? Like all of those things.
Yeah.
Or I might even ask too, like, can you turn on your location so that I can just at least see that you're at this person's house and you're not like dead in a ditch somewhere, right? Like you didn't drive home drunk.
I think that's totally fair.
Absolutely. And that is a relationship agreement that Peter and I have, is that we share each other's locations. We've both consented and agreed to it. And we have like parameters around how it is used, right? Like, to be clear, like this is not like I put a tracker on Peter's car and I know where he is all the time. Like it is mostly just like, oh, you said you were going to be home in 15 minutes and now it's an hour later. where are you? Oh, you're at Target. Got it. Great.
Yeah.
Right. So
Cute.
again, it's about like, you are telling us, and I think you know, or at least you have decided that he's not doing anything particularly wrong. This is, of course, triggering for you, and I totally get that. Like, a lot of emotions are coming up around this, and I understand.
Yes.
It sounds like a big part of it is the fact that he keeps being like, I'll be home soon, but then is not home in hours,
it would
which
be
again,
so challenging for me.
For sure.
So challenging.
So can you remove that from the equation? There is no, like,
Yes.
when are you coming home soon? That's just like not a conversation we're going to have because it's not going to go well, right? Like,
Yes.
and again, like, we might have people who are listening to this who are like thinking like, oh, absolutely not, right? Like, you need to be 100% honest all the time. You need to be in 100% communication all the time. And that probably works for some people's relationships. It doesn't work for all. It doesn't work for mine. Peter and I are not in constant conversation with each other. I'm bad at texting. I feel like it is not a strength of mine.
It's true.
So I want to say that, like, relationships can look like all different sorts of things, and we don't have to be like pure in everything. We can make concessions around this kind of stuff. We can say like, this isn't my ideal situation, and I'm going to figure out how to deal with it because I am willing to take this knock in the bouncy that is our relationship.
Yes. And I just want to say before we close, like, I think you have every right to communicate calmly and truthfully to your husband that, like, this is really triggering me and I'm trying not to blow it out of proportion because I know it's not that. But it's been very difficult for me each time you've done this and each time you have not done what I've requested of you. Help me work through this. You know what I mean? I've said that a couple times to Willow, like, you know, this isn't a big deal. I just need help muscling through it. Or, you know, this is embarrassing because, like, this makes me look really insecure and jealous, and I do feel insecure and jealous, but can you help me, you know, dethrone these emotions or you know, invite him in is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, if you already have done that, then, like, do it again because he's got to listen, you know, but you have every right to bring this to him and problem solve this together, and hopefully he'll respond. And this is in tandem with everything that Sam said, because I also do agree that there's going to be concessions, you know. There are things about our partners that we will just always find bizarre.
And it's perfectly understandable for us to have nights of anxiety in our relationships, right? Like, it is, we're never going to be 100% comfortable all the time. So again, it is about like, okay, I'm accepting that I'm going to have a rough night because you're doing this thing that we both want you to do, which is have fun with this friend. And given that this is an anxious night for me, what does tomorrow look like, right? Like, what are we agreeing to reconnect tomorrow? Or how am I going to take care of myself tomorrow, right? So again, it is about like acknowledging the fact that no relationship is perfect. No relationship is comfortable all the time. And if we can be accepting of that, then we can be more planful with how we're going to support ourselves, our partners, and our relationship in the face of that, in the reality of it. Yeah.
And it's a give and take. Like, I like the idea of sharing locations, you know, to be like, hey, listen, I'm not going to text you. I'm just going to expect you to come home late. But can you share your location so that if I wake up in the middle of the night and you're still not here, I can make sure that you're not, like, at the hospital or whatever. You know, there can be give and take in this. And we know you can do it. So good luck. Thanks for this juicy letter. We hope it helps.
Absolutely. We love you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, if you want more content from us, you can always support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to our episodes without ads. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DM, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and a review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and music. And remember, conflict in relationships, it's a part of love. It's a part of negotiating relationships. Boundaries are what we do to protect ourselves. We don't impose it on others. Unfortunately, we have to impose it on ourselves. I know this is tricky and antithetical to a lot of what we have learned, a lot of what we've said on this show, but it's a great unlearning, right? How do we uphold our values and our boundaries for ourselves? How do we advocate for ourselves? And how do we care and nurture for ourselves when we are uncomfortable? And if all else fails,
just break up.